Talking about what's been going on in Mexico with an 8.2 earthquake that has recently struck there, because this says Mexico earthquake strongest in a century kills dozens. And as we're now seeing, it's only getting worse and worse with all of the extreme weather. And once again, we're going to be reiterating Hurricane Irma and many other things such as the record wildfires later on. But this says right here that the most powerful earthquake to hit Mexico in 100 years struck off the nation's Pacific coast, and this was late last evening, rattling millions of residents in Mexico City with its violent tremors, killing at least 32 people and leveling some areas in the southern part of the country closer to the quake's epicenter. About 50 million people across Mexico felt the earthquake, which had a magnitude of 8.2, the government said. In the capital, the force of the temblor sent residents of the megacity fleeing into the streets at midnight, shaken by alarms blaring over loudspeakers in a full minute of tremors. Windows broke, walls collapsed, and the city seemed to convulse in terrifying waves. The quake even rocked the city's Angel of Independence monument. Now, this is what the USGS has reported. As you can see, within the past day alone, there have been 64 earthquakes reported to be a magnitude of 2.5 or higher within the region. But as we keep going, you'll see right here that they reported many aftershocks and after effects of the earthquake. But if we keep going all the way down, we'll see that the earthquake that they reported to be an 8.1, along with the 4.3 striking around Medford, Oklahoma. Now, there was also a tsunami warning that was issued for Mexico, but as of right now has been lifted. But now I'm keeping you updated also with many other weather events that are going on, because like I said, there are just way too many right now. And as you can see right here, this comes from the National Hurricane Center, or the NHC. And as you can see right now, as of this afternoon, there are 3 different storms that are in the Atlantic, 3 different hurricanes. The first is Hurricane Irma, which is listed right here. It's right above Cuba and is headed right towards the Bahamas and is supposed to make landfall in Florida in a few days from now, with many evacuations and even evacuations that have been made in places such as South Carolina, and we'll be going over that and also talking about the state of emergencies. As you can see right here, it's classified as a Category 4 storm with winds up to 155 miles per hour, which is very close to a Category 5. And then there's also Jose right here, which is classified as a Category 4 with winds up to 150 miles per hour, that's trailing right behind Irma. And then there's Katia over here, which is classified as a Category 2 storm. Now, interestingly enough, at around this time, you see not 1, not 2, but 3 different hurricanes and 3 different storms that are located in this region right now. Now, what I found very interesting and suspicious indeed about all of this is that the last time you saw 3 tropical storms that were churning in the Atlantic was as of September 16, 2016, or 9/16/16, that had to do with storms Ian, Julia, and Carl. And according to many reporters, the last time that you saw 3 hurricanes in this region was back on September 16th, 2010, or 9/16/2010. Do you notice a pattern? The 9/11, September 16. Here we go again, and these storms were called Igor, Julia, and Carl. Here we have the IJK, just like we did in 2016, and just like in 2017, or 9/10/11, 9/11. Now, another thing about Hurricane Irma that's very interesting to note and point out is that the eye of the storm is almost as big as the Detroit metropolitan area, and the entire hurricane would engulf the entire state of Michigan. And this is a picture below. As you can see, here's the storm right here, and here is the state of Michigan as it would look. And as you can see right here, the eye of the storm is just as big, and you can see that the storm itself pretty much covers the entire state of Michigan, at least the lower half of it. There are also many other reports that are calling this storm stronger than all of 2017's other 8 Atlantic storms combined, and this storm is headed to Florida next. There are also many models that are saying that this storm is one of the most powerful hurricanes that has ever been recorded in the Atlantic Ocean history. So do you see what time it is? Do you see the times that we're living in? And there are also many notable records. Now, this was reported as of yesterday, but it says as a Category 5 with sustained winds of 180 miles per hour, Irma now ranks among the most powerful hurricanes as measured by wind speed that has ever been recorded. Irma sustained 185 mile per hour winds for well over 24 hours, which is a record length of time for a hurricane in the Atlantic. It was also a Category 5 storm for well over 2 days, which is also nearly a record. And due to the effects of Hurricane Irma, it's already left Puerto Rico 1 million people without power. So there's been massive power outages that have been reported in places like Puerto Rico and many other places. And it's on its way to Florida, Georgia, and possibly the Carolinas. And the power outage is so bad that it could leave Puerto Rico without electricity for months. Does this remind you of anything? Does any of this sound familiar? Because just as we've been reporting for the past couple of weeks or so, because barely 2 weeks ago, as we talked about, we've been talking about the EarthX drills and the international drills that your government has been getting ready for, including FEMA, DHS, and all the other alphabet soups, including this one, the Emergency All-Sector Response Transnational Hazard Exercise, as of 8/23/2017, and it was designed to improve resilience to large-scale long-duration power outages through multi-sector exercises. And we even gone over some of the ones that they did even with Houston, because after Hurricane Harvey, more than 250,000 people were left without power. And then Taiwan, the power outage that happened there affecting millions the week before this exercise. And now Puerto Rico too, we see exactly what's been going on indeed, and exactly what's going on because your government already has a plan. They've been planning for these things ahead of time, as we're finally seeing. And then this interesting report here that says Hurricane Irma is, quote, going to devastate the United States. And this is according to the FEMA chief. The Hurricane Irma that is expected to make landfall in the U.S. is going to, quote, devastate the country. The chief of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, said. FEMA Administrator Brock Long said at a press conference that the hurricane will leave the portions of Florida without electricity for days, adding that over 100,000 of residents of the state will need shelter. And just as we talked about with Hurricane Harvey, they already said that Harvey was worse than Katrina, and it's only a matter of time until we see how bad Irma will be and affect different places. But the same chief also said that they're going to be staying in Texas for years. Why are they staying there that long? What are they doing there? Anytime you see FEMA and states of emergency and the National Guard, it's only keywords for martial law, just as I talked about, because now over 30,000 troops were headed to places such as Texas, and it's only a matter of time until they head to Florida too. And what you're going to see is that there are mass evacuations that are going on, but because of the storm, there have been states of emergencies declared in places such as Florida, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands. Just this afternoon, actually, there was a state of emergency declared by the Virginia governor for the entire state. Trump also declared a state of emergency in Georgia and also ordered federal assistance to the state in advance of the hurricane. And according to the White House, the president's action authorizes the DHS and FEMA to coordinate all disaster relief under a state of emergency, and we're just getting started. And then, due to all of the record wildfires that's occurring in northwestern United States, there have been states of emergency that have been issued in places such as Washington, California, with the entire Los Angeles region still looking at risk and on alert for these wildfires. The governor of Montana also issued the same exact thing. And not only was a state of emergency issued in Montana, but there's also been the mobilization of more than 300 Montana National Guard troops for the fire effort, which the governor said includes 125 aircraft and more than 4,000 firefighters and staff, plus thousands of volunteer firefighters. And because of the record wildfires, there's also the Oregon National Guard that has also been called in, just as we went over with the National Guard that's been called in places such as Texas, and even as we saw with Montana. And we cannot forget about all of the earthquake swarms that have been going on and taking place in the region of Idaho, very close to Yellowstone National Park. What are they getting ready for? Now, I also thought this was a very interesting post to note. This comes from Fox, actually, and it talks about the, of course, North Korean propaganda. But amid the hurricanes and the tropical storms and the earthquakes and the tremors and the record wildfires that we're seeing, they just so happen to come out with this article that says millions of American lives could be at stake as North Korea threatens to attack power grid. And we know darn well that it's not North Korea whatsoever. It's just more propaganda, problem, reaction, solution. Not to mention that North Korea is a rogue nation. Because North Korea refuses to accept the Rothschild Bank in their country, and that's why the elite and the Zionists are targeting that nation and trying to demonize them any way, shape, or form that they can. But we know they control both sides of it, and we know who's really behind the power grids and the power outages, as I've just shown you. It's all propaganda and it's all conditioning for their plans in the elite and the New World Order's order out of chaos agenda. Just like how they manipulate and control the weather via HARP and CERN and many other alphabet soup government organizations, and if you do not believe me, maybe you'll believe the director of the CIA from the Council on Foreign Relations, and maybe you'll believe what your government alphabet soups are actually telling you the truth right in front of you.
Another example is the array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI. A method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat. In much the same way that volcanic eruptions do. An SAI program could limit global temperature increases, reducing some risks associated with higher temperatures and providing the world economy additional time to transition from fossil fuels. This process is also relatively inexpensive. The National Research Council estimates that a fully deployed SAI program would cost about $10 billion yearly. As promising as it may be, moving forward on SAI would also raise a number of challenges for our government and for the international community. On the technical side, greenhouse gas emission reductions would still have to accompany SAI to address other climate change effects, such as ocean acidification, because SAI alone would not remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. On the geopolitical side, the technology's potential to alter weather patterns and benefit certain regions of the world at the expense of other regions could trigger sharp opposition by some nations. Others might seize on SAI's benefits and back away from their commitment to carbon dioxide reductions. And as with other breakthrough technologies, global norms and standards are lacking to guide the deployment and implementation of SAI and other geoengineering initiatives.
Now, as I've talked about in previous video, who is the Council on Foreign Relations, in case you've never heard of that organizations, or all the other ones like the Bilderbergs and the Club of Rome and etc., the Trilateral Commission, the CFR, what do? They're a group of elite Zionist terrorists at the very top who come together and talk about what? How they plan to enslave the population more and more for their what? Agendas and plans of the New World Order. And just as you've just heard, what do? They talk about how they seed the air with cloud seeding and iodide crystal, and how they manipulate the weather for their plan. And of course, they claim that, oh, it's because of climate change and oh, because of global warming they're doing this, but they're actually doing it for what? World control. Just ask Vietnam and Operation Popeye how they manipulated the weather in order to do what? To manipulate the weather in East Asia during the Vietnam War. Kissinger and all those other ones, they all come together. It's the satanic elite coming together to talk about worldwide depopulation tactics as per the UN's agenda of what? Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, Operation Depopulation. And maybe that could explain why Atlanta is opening up camping facilities for hurricane evacuees when it comes to Hurricane Irma, and this was as of a few days ago. And we know they've been announcing all of the evacuations and the mandatory evacuations that must take place in places such as Florida, and even such evacuations that could take places in places such as South Carolina and even North Carolina and Georgia and many other places on the East Coast. But notice how this says camping facilities. Could this be keyword for FEMA camps, keyword for martial law? Because as I also went over and talked about in my FEMA and my Walmart video just a few days ago, I talked about how during Hurricane Harvey and during Texas evacuations, ABC reported that for many of the evacuees in these areas and locations, and especially so-called low-income neighborhoods, that what were they doing? They were hiring and getting school buses to take them to wherever shelters they would go. But the question is, which shelters are they taking them to? And not only that, but then on another report, even a homeless man said how places such as the Salvation Army and many others were even killing other people. What are they talking about? What are they getting ready for? Do you think this is a surprise or coincidence? I've been talking about for how many years how they're preparing slowly but surely a test run for FEMA camps, martial law, and these concentration camps that's no longer a conspiracy theory. And it's all staffed, ready to go, as I've even shown you in Army military documents such as the Civilian Inmate Labor Program and also FM 3.39-40 that highlights how these facilities are going to look. That's why the National Guard has already started seizing guns because they want people to be defenseless come the New World Order. And even one report from CNN has even said that people are living in the New World Order after Hurricane Harvey. But is Hurricane Harvey and the facilities and everything that we saw with that, is that just a test run for the East Coast and Hurricane Irma? Let's find out. Of course, they're not going to call it what it is because they're going to do it behind closed doors, surreptitiously and sneakily do it. But call it what it is, and it's also no surprise that victims of Hurricane Harvey have even described some of the government shelters, so-called, and have even described them being as evacuees that have all been numbered. They even described it having color-coded walls, officers on platforms, the National Guards with metal detectors, and they even said that it looks like a concentration camp verbatim. What time do you think it is? Do you still think that all of this is a conspiracy theory? It's time to wake up and see the truth that's right in front of you, and also it's time to seek Yahuwah and his true son Yahusha like never before, because we know